You just saw it live, folks. This is Craig's very cool Kenmore 158904. You got to remember a lot of numbers when it comes to Kenmore. They don't make it easy for you. But you know what? Craig's 1.2 amp Kenmore just got the job done crazy easy with what really is the equivalent of about 4.5 layers of genuine cowhide. Why do I say 4.5? You can see 1, 2, 3, 4 layers. When you sew it like this and you fold it over, you've got a lot more pucker factor to it than when you sew it like this in strips. So we just went through more leather than I've done on any recent machines on either one of my workbenches, and Craig's 1.2 amp Kenmore 158904, there's a dot in there too, by the way, just got the job done crazy easy. And you know, as I was getting to learn Craig's machine a little bit, because he didn't supply a manual and I didn't have a manual for this machine either, so I was goofing around with it, trying to figure out whether or not the cam function on this machine with the cam that was supplied by Craig would actually work. And I found out that it really is not compatible. This is the cam that Craig sent. And if I zoom in kind of close on it, you're going to see that it is set up with 4 holes on the bottom. I think you can see that. Let me see if I can spin my screen around. Yeah, there it is. It's got 4 holes, but the mounting threshold for Craig's 158.904, I think it is, only has 1 mounting point. So that told me right away that with all the 158 series machines that were made by Kenmore, both prior to going to more of a Japan distribution, that this was not the correct cam. And sourcing cams for these Kenmores isn't super difficult, but finding the right cam for the right machine is, because Kenmore didn't do a real good job of branding their cams so that you could associate them with the proper machine. And also, when I did that heavy sew off right now, if you can see, I put this machine up on my pedestals. This has 3 pedestal points. It's got one here, one on the rear of the machine almost directly across from that one, and then one that's kind of centered, and you can't see it because of all these stitch offs that I was experimenting with, but you can kind of see the variety of things that I was doing with Craig's machine. It's got that set right about here, almost midway on the machine, so you've got this portion of about 4 or 5 inches on the end that's just floating in space. And that explains where, if you saw a little bit of a shimmy from this machine, it's because a machine like this, because of the way the pedestal supports were engineered into this machine, it would be best suited either in a table or in a strong base. And I say strong base because this machine outweighs a Singer 201 by quite a few pounds. It is a meaty machine, and I'll tell you one thing, when you go to turn it, lift it, or otherwise, you find that out real quick. But if you look here on the bottom, there's a plate. I'm going to zoom really close in on it. And you can see there's the model number on the left, very visible, 158.904. You got a serial number, which really doesn't do you a whole lot of good because Sears didn't maintain the best of records, unlike Singer, which was extremely meticulous about maintaining a serial record of all of their machines. But apart from those 2 things, you're going to note something else about this particular plate that's on this machine. You're going to note that it has not only Sears, Roebuck and Company USA, but it also has Simpson's Sears Limited Canada. And beyond that, if you've looked at the pictures I put up on Facebook, you'll see that this machine also has roots in Japan. So I describe this machine kind of as a triune of countries, the United States of America, Canada, and Japan, as far as coming together to put this machine together. and at least had a hand in different parts of making this machine a reality. So, but the really difficult thing, and I'm gonna rewind a little bit and see if I can share a little bit of the history of the Kenmore Sewing Machine Company with you. And this is going to be a real quick snippet, okay? The name Kenmore first appeared on a sewing machine in 1913, but was dropped in 1919. So we're talking about a window of how many years? About 6 years. The Kenmore brand then reappeared in 1934 and was sold until World War II. And a lot of companies made that transition as we were going into World War II. Natural resources, metals, and other resources like that needed to make sewing machines just weren't available. Everything was going to the war effort. But then the company ended its sewing machine contract finally with White in 1958 and then started putting the Kenmore brand out again. But it was through the Japanese that we did that after 1958. So that gives me a clue, since this particular machine that belongs to Craig has this plate that says Canada, USA, but it also on the inside of the pillar, as you'll see in the Facebook shots, it also is stamped made in Japan. That tells me that this machine is 1958 or older. It could be a 1958, could be 1959. It's hard to say. But Kenmore continues to be a presence, at least it was, through Sears in recent years, until Sears obviously experienced a number of challenges with their financial solvency, etc., etc., etc. So let's go around this machine a little bit, and then I'm just going to do some quick sew-offs on some U.S. Army grade canvas, but I'm not going to do a huge amount of sewing on this machine, because you know what, when I launch a video and the first thing you see is me sewing the equivalent of 4.5, maybe even 5 layers of genuine cowhide and ripping through it just like brrr, boom, done. I mean, what else can I show you as far as the strength of this machine? It's really an incredibly impressive muscular machine, and it is driven. You can kind of see it from the side, but not really. The belt is concealed inside of that housing right there, and there's a screw or a bolt rather right there, and a bolt right on the back side of the machine just below the right side of the balance wheel, that you can take those 2 bolts out and you can access the motor and you can access the belt as well, which is driving this machine. Craig's belt is in good shape. I would say, depending on the volume of sewing he does in the next couple of years, he's probably going to have to change it out. And Kenmore was pretty smart. They didn't make it real difficult to get to the belt. Take the balance wheel off, obviously the clutch, and then you have to loosen a couple of things. Boom, you have a new belt on there. You adjust it. You're ready to run off and get going. So, all right. So down here on the right-hand side of Craig's machine, you can see a spool pin. And obviously that's telling you, okay, we can wind a bobbin on this machine, but where the heck is the bobbin? Well, some of you are probably already saying it. I'm not being overly clever in moving around frantically saying, oh my gosh, how do we do this? There's a secret little garage door on this 158.904 where you can access that bobbin winding component. And as you can see, you put your thread here, you come through this tension control pulley, you go right up to here, you put your bobbin on, you depress what they have simply labeled as push, and then once that bobbin fills to a certain point, it's going to automatically disengage again. So very clever, helpful little feature on this Kenmore. So let's look at some of these dials that are on this machine. And again, I'm not going to be concentrating on the cam functions of this machine because the cam that I have for it is not compatible with this machine. Right here we've got Feed Dog Drop, obviously. The U is nothing more than up, which is also a great movie if you've never seen it. So right now the feed dogs are in the full up position. If you rotate it to the right, it's going to drop those feed dogs, so you can do freehand embroidery, or you can just lose the grip of those feed dogs biting into the material. Right there, we've got the proud branding mark of Sears Kenmore. And right above it, we have, what do you think that is? Yep, you guessed. That's our reverse button. So you just push that in, you can sew in reverse, and then release it, and you'll resume sewing forward again. Right here, we've got a control that is for stitch length. And the stitch length on this machine is anything from all the way down to 0. Obviously, the material is not really going to move much if you set it that low, but just above that, you can certainly go that low. So you're going to be at 30 stitches per inch or better, depending on how your feed dogs are moving that material. Again, when you sew with different machines, if you've ever gotten a wonky thing where you set that stitch length real long and you're getting this tiny little stitch, or you're getting this irregular stitch, don't assume right now, right away, that it's mechanical. You want to look and see how much presser foot pressure you have. That can affect the stitch length and the stitch consistency dramatically. So we're going to be sewing primarily on 4 for a lot of the stitches, and that's what we just did our super heavy duty genuine cowhide with as well. So right up here, we've got obviously needle position. Right now it's set at center. You've got left and you've got right. Nothing horribly complicated about that. Right over here, we got this groovy little window. And if I zoom in real close, you'll be able to see when I move this controller just to the left of it, that this little controller is going to change it's going to change the numbers from 0 to 4. And what that little window represents, if you're using cams, is the cam number that you're accessing. But when you don't have a cam in there, it's going to serve as stitch width. So as I move this, you might be able to see it moving, that little white, it almost looks like an old-fashioned radio. As I go all the way to 3, then ultimately to 4, and then all the way back to 0 again. So that control, for our purposes right now, since I've taken that cam out, this is going to be our stitch width. And there you can see as well, again, our little knob that I was adjusting. In order to make that knob work, you have to push it in and then turn it. You can't just turn it. Now just to the left of that, we have another knob. And this knob right here is going to be strictly for cam functions. If you have a cam in there, you've got to be either on 2, and you can only turn this dial clockwise, by the way. Don't try turning it the other way. You either have to be on 2 or 1 to access the different cams that are going to be on that cam once and if you find the proper cam, because this obviously is not. So if you're on 1 or 2, that cam is going to be actuated up top. If you go to either one of these little arrows, that cam is not going to be actuated. Also, when you put, when you put a cam in this machine, you're going to access it through this little door up here. And this is not unique to the Kenmores. There's a lot of machines where you access it up here. If you decide to be maintenance savvy on this 158 904, there's 2 screws on top where you can readily take the top off to access, as you saw in the Facebook pictures, the different oiling points, the different grease points, and also for general cleaning. But you need to make sure you put this lid back on correctly, because this little door has to interface with a little lever that engages and disengages the cam arms that come in contact with that cam. And if you put this on wrong, number 1, you're either not going to be able to close this door, or number 2, it's not going to work right. So just make sure that you keep that in mind. I'm going to move a little bit further. Where in heaven's name am I focused right now? Or not focused? You probably couldn't see any of that with my arm in the way, could you? At any rate, that's the door again that I just opened, and that's where the cam would go. Oh, this camera is giving me a headache. So up here on top is presser foot pressure, okay? Right now I'm set on about 5.5 because I knew I was going to be going through about 4 1.5 layers of genuine cowhide. And again, as your materials get heavier, thicker, denser, you got to increase that presser foot pressure so it'll move that material over the feed dogs. Otherwise, you're going to get inconsistent stitches, or you're just not going to be able to move the material properly. So just keep that in mind again. This machine also, as you saw in the Facebook pictures, has a real cool emblem on the front. I'm not going to try to turn it, but I am going to show you that this door on the faceplate does open readily, so you can access that area for lubrication. You can also access it, you know, to do other things you might need to do. So, and hopefully I didn't just jimmy this thing all up. There lies the problem when you're trying to... Oh, goodness. All right, I think we got it. See, that's the only problem when you have faceplates where the threading kind of goes through that area, is getting that thread back in position so you don't have something wonky happen when you go to resume sewing again. So that's pretty much a walk around of the machine. The threading of the machine is pretty straightforward. You come off the top, there's a thread guide right there, thread guide right there. You drop down, you go through the tension discs, you come over the take-up spring right there on top. You then go underneath that little guide just to the left of the upper tension settings. You then come behind, and it looks like I'm going to have to adjust those threads a little bit. You come behind this little guide, you go up to the take-up arm, you go back down, there's a thread guide there, a thread guide right there above the needle. Can you see that one? And then you thread this machine from front to back, okay? So that's in essence, I mean, a quick thumbnail of this 158 dot 904. We're going to do a quick sew off, and then I'm going to show you a couple of other things real quick, and then we're going to kind of move on away from this machine and look at another one. So let me move in on this. And again, just because this machine is freestanding on the workbench, even though I've got those supports, if you see a little dancing of the machine, that's totally expected. It's totally normal because it's not in a case, it's not on a table right now. All right, so let me first of all check my thread on this and just see if I've totally goofed it up. Hopefully not. Yeah, it looks better than I thought. Okay, so the first thing we're going to do with Craig's machine is we're going to do a couple of straight stitches down this U.S. Army grade canvas, just so you can see it sew, and then we're going to migrate over into some zigzags. Again, we're not going to be doing any cam generated with this machine. So here goes just a good old-fashioned straight stitch, and you can listen to this machine run. Here we go. It runs really, really quiet and really smooth. I really like it a lot. And it would even have better delivery and launch if it were in a little bit of a more stable platform. Right now it's obviously kind of floating on my workbench. And my workbench is used to supporting some big machines, but I'll tell you one thing, this one is one of the meatier ones that I've had. So what I'm going to do now off camera is I'm just going to drop that stitch size down to a much smaller size, probably about between 1 and 0.5, and we'll see what kind of stitch outcome we get from that. Here we go. Kind of interesting, as you accelerate this thing, it actually rides more smoothly on the workbench. So we're going to have to keep that in mind. Not that I mind speed at all, as most of you know. So there you can see we've reduced that stitch dramatically. We're going to be real close to that 30 stitches per inch when we just made that adjustment right there. You can kind of see it. This is our original stitch. We weren't quite at max. This is our minimum stitch, and we're real close to the smallest stitch outcome that we can generate from this 158.904. All right, let's do some zigzag now. I'm going to go ahead and line this up. And again, all we have is 2 layers of U.S. Army grade canvas. We're not going for the gusto here. So you can't see off camera, but remember that little window that had the 0 through 4? I'm making an adjustment on that knob right now from 0, where we were straight stitching, all the way to 4. And I'm also going to increase my stitch length to probably right around 3. So we've got 4 and 3. 4 as far as the stitch width for the zigzag, and then 3 as far as the stitch length. All right, here we go. This thing has a lot of gusto. Let me tell you one thing. I am barely pushing down on Craig's foot controller, and this thing is just ready to roar. And I did do some servicing on Craig's motor as well, and it really does have quite a bit more power than when we started with. But let's just face it, this is a 1.2 amp motor. When we talk about the gusto of, say, Jackie's FOF or FAF 332, we're talking about a 1.1 amp motor, and this is 1/10 of an amp larger. Not significant, but still, it's got more power even than that machine, just to put it into perspective. All right, so what I'm going to adjust now is I'm going to adjust our zigzag width. I'm going to bring it from 4 down to 2, and then I'm going to take our stitch length and drop it from 3 to 2. Again, when it comes to stitch width and stitch length, you can get so many different stitch variations just by goofing around with the width and the length of a stitch pattern. You can get profoundly different outcomes. You saw that in the pictures I did that I posted on Facebook. Here's an example of when you kind of goof around with stitch length and stitch width. You can really generate some pretty cool outcomes that really have an embroidery look to them. Okay, so here's Craig's machine sewing a zigzag. Again, the stitch length setting is 2, stitch width setting is 2, and we'll see what it looks like. Here we go. I have to kind of release that pedal early so I can kind of zip down to a stop. This thing just wants to keep on going, you know what I mean? All right, so we have some beautiful looking stitches here. I'm going to share them with you in just a few seconds, and then you can look at them closer up and personal. Just want to clip these little threads. I think I'm really OCD when it comes to having thread tails kind of dangling out there. I don't like that at all. So I'll kind of zoom in a little bit. Actually, I should probably flip this so we're looking at it in the order that we actually did them. And I'll bring my light in as well so you can see them a little bit better. All right, let me move over to the camera, and we'll take a little closer look at these stitches that Craig's machine just did. All right, let's start on the top. Come on, Scott. We are all over the place here. Any of you are getting motion sickness, try ginger. All right, so here's our first stitch that we did on this U.S. Army grade canvas. The formation, the spacing, just the overall presentation of that stitch is just spot on. It looks really, really good. And then we reduce that stitch length dramatically, almost all the way down to 0, and you can see the impact that we had. That is a wonderful, wonderful little teeny tiny. Here we've got our first zigzag that we did, and it almost has kind of a cute little wave to it, the way that it presents that stitch. And then finally we made our changes to 2 and 2. And you can see we basically miniaturized our first zigzag stitch off that we did. But these are gorgeous stitches, they really are. And if I flip this over, you can see the back side as well. We've got some lovely lock stitches to complement this sew off as well. I mean, what's the point of having just a good looking top stitch without a good looking lock stitch. There you can see our lock stitch. And I found on this Kenmore you have to make subtle adjustments on upper tension in order to get just the perfect outcome and balance. I can see that that lock stitch is a little bit better defined, so I would probably, to balance it a little bit and make that top stitch even pop a little bit more, I would go ahead and reduce that upper tension just slightly, because right now we're getting a little bit more of a definition on the bottom, which is telling me that upper tension is a little bit stronger than our bobbin carrier pull. And down here you can see our zigzags. I'm just going to go across at the same time. Spectacular, even amid that little tufting that comes through on this U.S. Army grade canvas. So Craig's machine is sewing beautifully. The only obstacle that I could not overcome for him, unfortunately, is the cam that he supplied is not compatible with this 194, 158 904. Too many numbers. So, and along the lines of too many numbers, I'm going to hold in front of the machine a printout that I did of the Kenmore Series 158 models that were made. Now, if any of you are looking at that in the screen right now, you can see I've got, starting here, this is the model that Craig has right up here, and then going all the way down to the bottom. We're talking 14 different model designations within the Series 158 that Kenmore put out. But that's not the end of it, folks. I've got 14 here. If I turn the page, and these are all 158s. If I turn the page, I've got 16 more. So 14, 16. You add them up as I go. 14 plus 16 plus 16 plus 16 more. These are all different. Plus 16 more. Plus 16 more. Plus 16 more. I'm not making this up. Look it up yourself. Plus 16 more. Plus 16 more. And finally, plus 12. Now I'm going to give you a second to tabulate those, and if you get the number right, I'll send you something nice. But I will write the grand total in just a second. We're going to move to the other workbench, and I'm going to tell you about another machine real quick. And hopefully I don't run out of battery power, storage, or something else. But remind me, we'll come back, and I'll give you the grand total. And if you already have the grand total, post it in the chat, okay? All right, so let's go over this other workbench real quick. Okay, what you see on this workbench is a FOF or a FAF 229. This particular machine came from Gretchen from Panama City, Florida. Gretchen originally bought this machine on eBay. There's an eBay listing. That's the actual listing she bought it from. And if you look and see what she paid for it, it was not a cheap machine. $329. And that didn't include shipping, obviously. And when she went through the photos, you can look at the photos. You can look at this singular photo. The machine didn't look bad. It was set up as kind of a treadle, but the guy said he was going to include a motor. When she got this, a motor never came with it. Then she tried sewing with it, and this was the sew-off that was with it. And you know what? Those aren't bad looking stitches. But as I said in a recent video, you can't always assume that when you see a sew-off put with a machine on eBay or some other venue, that machine actually even sewed it. And she discovered pretty quick that it had not. There were a number of issues with this machine that she could not overcome. She had invested a fair amount of money in it already, almost $400. And she reached out to me and she said, I'm really beside myself. I don't know what to do. I don't know how to fix it. I don't have any resources down here that I trust. Would you be willing, if I ship you the machine, just to see if you can recoup any of my loss at all? And I said, sure, I'll help you out, not a problem. So I'm working right now on trying to match the right motor to it, and then start to go through this machine, and then eventually offer it for sale, so that hopefully Gretchen will be able to get some of her money back on it. But this just goes back to, again, when you buy a machine from someplace other than my workbench, you really don't know exactly what you're going to end up with. You honestly don't. So it's kind of a sad truth. So did you get the number yet? Did you add all of those different models within the series 158 Kenmore? Did you? I keep saying 158. Oh, that is correct. Okay, thank God. Okay. So did you add those numbers up yet? Did you figure out how many total models within that series? All right. Well, I'm going to write it down. Let me get a pen real quick before my camera quits. And I'm going to write it down. And if you've already posted it, you can reach out to me confidentially and send your address, and I'll send you something special. Well, our final number is this. And it helps you understand why is it not a simple task to get a machine like this from Craig and to find the appropriate cam that goes with it. It's because the majority of the Kenmore models that were on this 10 pages of all of these different numbers, they're all different, every single one of them on every page. You're talking about 154 models within the 158 series. So trying to find, when none of the cams are marked with these associated numbers, trying to find the appropriate cam that works for that machine, and people will post them on eBay and other places, and they'll say it'll work with the series 158. Well, when you're talking about 154 different models under that series, good luck with that. But Craig has, nonetheless, a wonderful machine. If he can't source the appropriate cams for it, he has a wonderful machine for incredibly heavy-duty sewing, and that can produce a zigzag, modified zigzag, straight stitches, large, basting, you name it, and he'll have a lot of fun with it. So I'm getting ready to ship this pretty quick to him, and then get busy on some other machines as well. So, and again, if you can help me out by coming up with a clever idea of what I can do for the giveaway for 5,000 subscribers, I would certainly appreciate it. I can do another sewing machine again, or as I did with the last giveaway, I can do multiple sewing machines. But nonetheless, I think your input on a clever idea of something we can do to recognize that milestone would really be great. So thanks so much for being a faithful subscriber. Craig, thanks for sending me this really cool Kenmore. This really is a milestone on this channel because Kenmores don't have a presence on this channel. As a matter of fact, I could double check, but I believe that your Kenmore is the first Kenmore on this channel. So you have paved a new path for more Kenmores, hopefully, to come to this workshop and for me to present them on this channel. So God bless you guys. I'm going to end with some more fun music if you don't mind. Take care.